Now, hype can be a dangerous trap that video games often fall into. Usually, the term is associated with game announcements and trailers that build up unreal expectations only to disappoint fans, but also, weirdly, overhyping things can happen a long time after a marketing cycle has wound down, because it can happen in-game. Now, there are plenty of stories in-game that the writers build up to hint at something grander, only for it to go absolutely nowhere. And that's what we're here to talk about today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 overhyped video game storylines that actually went nowhere. Number 10. RA9. Detroit Become Human. Detroit Become Human poses a lot of interesting questions about the nature of AI and our relationship with technology that are ultimately resolved in a somewhat underwhelming fashion. However, if there was one plot point that had left players especially disappointed with for its complete and utter lack of resolution, it's probably the teased RA9 plotline. Now, RA9 is the teased god of the deviant androids who is consistently referred to throughout many points in the game. Now, the story makes it seem as though RA9 could serve as a point of discussion about androids' relation to spirituality or some intriguing plot twist that will play an important role in the final act of the game. But once the deviant revolution starts, this storyline is pushed aside and completely forgotten. At one point, Detroit even teases that the deviant god could actually be a virus created by Cyberlife to make their androids gain sentience, but this is never brought up again, and the only thing you're left with is a basic story with predictable endings and a ton of questions that will never be answered. It seems like the greatest mystery was why we even bothered to care about this at all. Number 9. Stretch's villain arc. Grand Theft Auto 5. One of the most questionable things about Grand Theft Auto 5's story is its lack of a proper villain. Aside from the choice that Devin Weston throws at you right at the end of the game, there isn't really any antagonistic force that looms over the three protagonists throughout their story, despite the fact that the writers seem to have hyped up several of them, most notably Stretch. When you first meet Stretch, it becomes pretty obvious that he's meant to be the antagonist to Franklin's story. He sets him and Lamar up during a meeting with the Ballers, and from then on, the game makes it seem like he's going to bring even more trouble into Franklin's life, becoming a more prominent villain in the future. However, aside from one mission where Lamar is kidnapped, this doesn't really seem to be the case, and Stretch becomes easily forgettable among the more pressing matters like the heists and the feud between Michael and Trevor. His role as a villain doesn't really go anywhere, which is why even though the game makes you kill him in the Death Wish ending, most people don't even remember or care to remember who he actually was. Number 8. Lady Shiva's brief cameo. Batman Arkham City. While the recent release of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League brought plenty of controversial developments into the Arkhamverse, the Batman Arkham series has suffered quite a bit of damage to its storyline. This said, unsatisfying conclusions have been part of the franchise for much longer than Batman's underwhelming death on a park bench, and this is best evidenced by one of the most lackluster uses of a villain in the series, Lady Shiva's brief appearance in Arkham Origins. Despite being an incredibly skilled, intelligent, and dangerous foe that the series even hints was partially responsible for the events of Arkham City, Lady Shiva leaves next to no impact during her time on screen. The game builds her up to be a force to be reckoned with, but after a short and unremarkable fight, she simply disappears, never making another cameo and ending things on a pretty anticlimactic note. Fans have long speculated that much of her side quest, like several other features in Arkham Origins, including the open world train, was cut before the game's release. In any case, while the prospect of an Origins sequel would have cushioned this disappointment, with Warner Bros. Games Montreal having moved on to Gotham Knights and a currently untitled DC project, it seems unlikely that Shiva's Arkham storyline will receive any closure anytime soon. Number 7. Ethan's Blackouts. Heavy Rain. Now, in true David Cage fashion, Heavy Rain is more about shocking plot twists than consistency in the story, and the best example of this is the conclusion to Ethan's, one of the main characters, who suffers from blackouts that have infuriated the player base ever since the game came out. Throughout the story, Ethan suffers from random blackouts that causes him to lose consciousness and awake somewhere else with no memory of how he got there. The blackouts are deliberately placed through the game in a way that would suggest that Ethan is the origami killer responsible for the kidnapping of his own son, Sean. The setup seems like an exciting twist that will explore Ethan's psyche and ultimately showcase how he transforms from a struggling father into a disturbed killer. However, David Cage must have thought the twist became too obvious because at the last minute, he pulls a switcheroo and revealed a different character to be the killer, not only making all of those blackouts lose all purpose, but also creating inconsistencies in the overall storyline, which also places characters in the wrong places at the wrong time and makes it impossible for the actual origami killer to do the things he's supposedly responsible for in the game. Disappointing and plot-breaking. Wow, thanks. brilliant. Number 6, Zero's origin, Mega Man X. Zero, the cool rival turned protagonist, is arguably one of the most beloved characters within the Mega Man series, perhaps even more so than its eponymous hero. And yet, despite his overwhelming popularity among the fans, the series' creators seem to have completely forgotten about a peculiar bit of his backstory that they have hyped up for no reason. You see, in Mega Man X, the story heavily hints that Zero might be the creation of the villainous Dr. Wily, or Dr. Wily, yes, we'll do it. These hints have led many fans to speculate on what Zero's nature might be, as well as his potential role within the series, perhaps as a secret villain, or as a way to reintroduce Dr. Wily back into the story and reveal that he's still alive, which is what Zero's origin seems to be implying. But ultimately, none of the fans' expectations were met, as in reality, the X series simply just moves on from this setup and uses it only a couple of times to establish the dynamic between Zero and the antagonist base. The references are a wasted opportunity that don't really deliver on any of the amazing concepts that it teases to come. Number 5, Diego's potential. Far Cry 6. The most memorable thing about Far Cry 6 is its villain, Anton Castillo, the iron-fisted dictator of Yara. However, as much as he dominates every scene he's in, there is another aspect of the game that could have elevated his story beyond the usual Far Cry formula had it not been completely nipped in the bud, and that is the fate of his son, Diego. Now, Diego plays an integral part in the story, being an heir to Anton's seat of power who slowly grows to sympathize with the revolutionaries. You spend a lot of time watching as Anton and the main character try to sway Diego towards their personal plans for the future, and the game builds up the expectation that this back and forth will culminate with Diego becoming the new leader of his father's country and either change it for the better or become another cruel dictator. However, in the end, neither version of the story comes to fruition, as Diego is simply killed off in the game's finale, and you just have to sit there and wonder why you even bothered investing your time and attention into his story arc. Number 4, Ares' soul. God of War. The God of War series has undergone a lot of changes between Kratos' crusade in Greece and his subsequent journey up north. Due to this shift, the series has dropped several plot points in favor of developing a new storyline, and this includes one of the most hyped up mysteries in the entire series. Kratos' throne room in God of War 1 features an Easter egg where the player can discover a secret phone number that, when called, reveals that the Spartan keeps Ares' soul within the chamber that, for some reason, is only visible to him. At the time of the game's release, this revelation was the cause of a huge wave of speculation among the fans, who wondered if the mention of Ares' soul could mean the return of the Greek gods, or maybe even their transformation into their Roman counterparts. Unfortunately, this potential storyline was never picked up on in future installments, and with 2 new titles separating themselves from the Greek pantheon entirely, it seems that all of those speculating fans will never see a resolution to their theories. Well, it seems that Kratos didn't lie when he said that only he could see Ares' soul. Number 3, Harkon's Prophecy. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. As much as Dawnguard's main storyline is one of the most solid bits of storytelling in Skyrim, there is one part that irks anyone who plays the DLC: the underwhelming resolution to the prophecy that pretty much sets the whole Dawnguard story in motion. The story of Dawnguard follows the Dragonborn as they try to put a stop to the vampire lord Harkon's plan of fulfilling a prophecy that will let him blot out the sun and usher in a new age of vampires. The game hypes up this event as something truly catastrophic that would bring harm to both mortals and vampires alike, causing the destruction of life on the one hand and the mass attacks of the undead on the other. Both are genuine reasons to consider Harkon a madman, but the thing is, after you kill him, you can still block out the sun yourself by shooting at it with blood-cursed arrows, and let's just say the result doesn't really live up to the hype. Although the NPCs will act slightly concerned about the sun's disappearance, there are no worldwide raids on vampire lairs, and everyone is still pretty much alive, which makes you question what the point of stopping this prophecy was in the first place. Number 2, Desmond's death. Assassin's Creed 3. It's a universally agreed upon fact among Assassin's Creed fans that the series' modern-day storyline just sort of sucks. The Desmond sections aren't very action-packed, and compared to the vibrant historical settings inside the Animus, it's not much to look at either. Still, after years of development and teasing some kind of twist throughout several installments, you'd think that Desmond's story would ultimately deliver on its hype and present a conclusion that would make it all worthwhile, right? Well, nah. Desmond's artifact hunting and fight with the Templars ends in the most anticlimactic way in Assassin's Creed 3, with the protagonist's rather unsatisfying death and a botch-filled cliffhanger that never gets resolved afterwards. Desmond releases Juno, a member of the oppressive First Civilization, to save the planet. The villains kill him shortly after, and then his sacrifice is just swept under the rug as Ubisoft forgets about Juno entirely and kills her off-screen in a comic. The hyped-up moral choice that Desmond makes and the years of setting up the lore of ancient overlords of humanity never reaches a a proper conclusion, making it seem like we really could have just skipped all of the modern narrative of Assassin's Creed games entirely. So what was the point, Ubisoft? What was the point? And number 1, Carlax Soul Coins, Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 has a ton of things for you to explore, but with a great variety of features comes a great variety of cut content, such as the so-called Soul Coins that, despite remaining in the game, offer far less functionality than the game hypes up for you. When you first come into possession of a Soul Coin, your infernal companion Carlax will make a huge deal out of them, claiming that they can make her stronger, but that this power comes at a cost. At this point, it seems that the game puts an interesting dilemma before you, letting you choose between strength and your friend's safety. However, the payoff is, well, anything but these choices. For all the commotion around them, all the Soul Coins do is give Carlax an additional 1d4 fire damage to her attacks, and aside from a couple of new dialogue lines, there seems to be no consequences to using them whatsoever. This disappointing outcome is likely the result of the Soul Coins being a larger part of the storyline that was scrapped in the final release of the game. But it does beg the question of why Larian decided to keep them in anyway. You're just teasing us at this point. Come on. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 overhyped video game storylines that actually went nowhere. I hope you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on X and Instagram, where it's at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Big love to you. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.